You were not supposed to end up here. That is the first thing I want you to understand before we go any further. You were not supposed to end up sitting in a car you are still paying off, parked outside a house you are still mortgaging, checking a bank account that somehow, despite everything, never quite has enough in it. You were not supposed to feel this particular kind of tired, not the tired that comes from being broke, the tired that comes from earning well, working hard, doing everything right, and still feeling financially suffocated. This is not the poverty they warned you about. Nobody warned you about this kind. They told you about the poverty of empty refrigerators and disconnected utilities. They told you about the poverty of skipped meals and unpaid rent. They drew a very clear picture of what financial struggle looked like. And it looked like scarcity, like obvious lack, like a life that everyone around you could plainly see was not working. Nobody told you that you could earn 6 figures and feel just as trapped. Nobody told you that the number on your paycheck could grow every single year for a decade and you could still arrive at 40 with no real assets, no real freedom, and no real idea how it happened. Nobody told you that making more money in the absence of the right understanding is not liberation. It is just a more expensive cage. This book is about that cage. It is about how it is built, who builds it, how you walked into it voluntarily and even gratefully, and, most importantly, how you walk out. Let me tell you about someone I will call Marcus. He is a composite of dozens of real people I have spoken to, studied, and in some cases been adjacent to. Marcus grew up in a modest household. His parents worked constantly and still struggled. He watched that struggle and made himself a promise. He was going to make real money. He was going to earn his way out of that anxiety. And he did. By 32, Marcus was earning $140,000 a year. By 35, he had been promoted twice more. By 38, he was clearing $190,000. He drove a German car. He lived in a neighborhood with good schools. He took a real vacation every year. By every external metric, he had won. Inside the numbers, though, something different was happening. His lifestyle had expanded in exact proportion to his income. Every single time his income grew, the car payment, the mortgage on the house that was just slightly nicer than the previous one, the private school tuition they had not quite planned for but could not imagine taking back now, the dinners out because the weeks were so exhausting, the subscription services that had accumulated quietly in the background, the wardrobe that needed to stay current because appearances mattered at his level, the financial advisor who was, without Marcus fully realizing it, primarily interested in selling him products rather than building his wealth. At 38, Marcus had a high income and almost no net worth. He had a lifestyle he could not reduce without feeling like he was going backward. He had a job he could not quit because the job was the only thing holding the entire structure upright. He was not poor. He was something arguably harder to escape. He was financially dependent at a high income level. He was caught in the high income trap. This book is going to take you through exactly how that trap works. We are going to talk about the psychological machinery that drives lifestyle inflation, about the social architecture that makes high earners uniquely vulnerable to status spending, about the identity traps that make it almost impossible to cut back even when you know you should. We are going to talk about how the financial services industry profits from your confusion, how your employer has more control over your life than you have acknowledged, and how the very habits of mind that made you successful are often the same habits that keep you stuck. And then we are going to talk about the way out, because there is one. It is not complicated, but it requires you to see clearly, perhaps for the first time, what has actually been happening. Some of what I am going to say will make you uncomfortable. Some of it will feel like an accusation. I want to tell you in advance, it is not. It is an honest attempt to describe a system that is working exactly as designed, and you are not a fool for having been caught in it. You are a human being operating inside incentive structures that were built by very sophisticated people who wanted you exactly where you are. Awareness is the beginning of exit. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Arrival. There is a moment for almost everyone who grows up without money when they believe they will know they have made it. It will feel a certain way. There will be a sensation of solidity, of ground beneath the feet, of doors that no longer need forcing open. There will be a morning, they imagine, when they wake up, and the financial anxiety is simply gone, like a fever that broke in the night. That morning does not come. And the not coming of it is one of the most psychologically significant and least discussed phenomena in personal finance. We need to understand why, because the answer is not simply that people are greedy or that they never have enough. The answer is rooted in how the human mind constructs the concept of enough in the first place, and it turns out that the construction is fundamentally social, fundamentally relative, and fundamentally resistant to satisfaction. The economist Urzo Lutmer and Richard Easterlin independently documented what has come to be called the Easterlin paradox. Within a society at any given time, richer people report greater happiness than poorer people. But across time, as societies grow wealthier, average happiness does not increase. And when individuals receive raises or income gains, their reported well-being increases briefly and then returns with remarkable consistency to their previous baseline. The gain does not stick. The hedonic treadmill, the tendency to rapidly adapt to new circumstances and return to a relatively stable level of satisfaction, runs for everyone, but it runs especially hard for people in high-income environments. Why? Because the comparison class shifts. When you were earning $40,000 a year, your reference point for financial success was probably your neighborhood, your family, your immediate social world. When you start earning $140,000, that social world changes. Your colleagues are earning similarly or more. Your new neighborhood has different norms. The benchmarks shift. What felt like arriving when you imagined it from below turns out to be simply a new floor, with the ceiling just as far above your head as it always was. This is not a personal failing. It is a deeply wired feature of human social cognition. We are, at the most fundamental level, a comparative species. We assess our resources not in absolute terms, but in relation to the people around us. This was adaptive in the ancestral environment, where relative status had direct consequences for survival and reproduction. It is significantly less adaptive when it means that no amount of income growth ever produces a lasting sense of financial security. The trap begins here, in this gap between the imagined arrival and the lived reality, because here is what happens in that gap. You do not stop spending to fill it. You accelerate spending to fill it. You pursue the feeling of having arrived through the symbols of arrival, the car that signals success, the home in the right neighborhood, the vacations that get posted and seen, the restaurants and the schools and the watches and the bags that communicate to yourself and to your social world that you have made it, that you are in the category you worked so hard to reach. This is not vanity, or it is not only vanity, it is a very human response to a very human psychological pressure. When the internal sense of arrival fails to materialize, we reach for external proxies. We try to construct the feeling through the things that are supposed to accompany it. And this is precisely where the machinery of the trap engages, because every single one of those proxies costs money, and every single one of those proxies, once purchased, becomes baseline. It becomes the new floor. It becomes the thing you cannot give up without feeling like you are going backward. The car is not a luxury anymore, it is simply what you drive. The neighborhood is not an achievement anymore, it is simply where you live. The restaurants are not treats, they are just Tuesday. The financial consequence of this psychological process is devastating and almost perfectly invisible to the person experiencing it. Lifestyle inflation, the expansion of expenditure to match income growth, happens not through dramatic decisions, but through the slow accumulation of new normals. Each individual choice is defensible, reasonable, even modest. It is only when you look at the aggregate, when you look at what percentage of each raise actually translated into savings or net worth, that the pattern becomes visible. And by then, you are often deeply embedded in a cost structure you cannot easily unwind. I want to spend a moment on the word embedded, because it is doing a lot of work here. The lifestyle you build is not just a set of financial choices. It is a social and psychological infrastructure. Your children go to the school in this neighborhood. Your friendships are with people who do the things you do. Your professional identity is partly constructed through the things you own and where you live. Your marriage or partnership has adapted to this standard of living and has expectations built around it. This is why, when people in this situation sit down with a spreadsheet and try to figure out where the money went and what they could cut, they almost always find that there is nothing they can easily cut without a cost that feels disproportionate to the financial gain. Cancel the streaming services? Sure, that is $40 a month. Cancel the gym? Another $60. Stop eating out? That requires cooking, which requires time, which they do not have because they are working the hours required to sustain the income that supports the lifestyle that they cannot reduce. The arithmetic of high-income lifestyle inflation is particularly cruel because the numbers feel large and the margins feel thin simultaneously. Someone earning $180,000 a year might look at someone earning $40,000 and feel wealthy. They might look at their own monthly cash flow and feel perpetually strapped. Both experiences are real. The income is genuinely high. The margin, the difference between what comes in and what goes out, is genuinely thin, and the thin margin is not incidental. It is the direct product of the psychological and social processes we have just described. The illusion of arrival is not just that arrival does not come. It is that the pursuit of the feeling of arrival is itself the mechanism that prevents actual financial security from developing. The more aggressively you spend to feel like you have made it, the less you actually make it. The more you perform prosperity, the less you build it. There is another dimension to this that is worth naming directly: the role of fear. Specifically, the fear of going backward. For people who grew up without money, the memory of that scarcity is formative and often frightening. It creates a powerful aversion to anything that looks or feels like regression. This is psychologically understandable and in many ways admirable. The drive that got them out of poverty was real and cost them real effort. But when it translates into financial behavior, it creates a paradox. The fear of going backward financially becomes the primary driver of behavior that makes going forward financially nearly impossible. Because cutting spending feels like going backward, driving the older car feels like going backward, moving to the slightly less prestigious neighborhood feels like going backward, and so the person who built their life around never going backward finds themselves in a position where they cannot make any of the forward moves, saving aggressively, building assets, taking financial risks with asymmetric upside, because all of those moves require accepting some version of present reduction in exchange for future gain. The fear of the past keeps them anchored to a present that is preventing any real future. We will talk about how to dismantle this fear in a later chapter. For now, I want you simply to recognize it, because it may be operating in your life in ways you have not named. Think about the financial decisions you have made in the last few years. How many of them were driven by genuine desire, genuine pleasure, genuine forward momentum? And how many of them were driven by the need to not feel like you were slipping, by the need to maintain, to protect, to signal that you were still in the category you had fought so hard to reach? The answer to that question is the beginning of clarity. The illusion of arrival is seductive and persistent because it is built from something real. The genuine desire to be safe, to be secure, to have the life that represents the successful end of a long struggle. That desire is not wrong. What is wrong, or rather, what is costly, is the way it has been captured and redirected by forces that profit from keeping you in the trap. More on those forces shortly. First, let us look more closely at the specific mechanics of how money gets absorbed once you are inside the trap. Chapter 2. The machinery of lifestyle inflation. If you wanted to design a system that would reliably extract the maximum possible spending from someone as their income grew, you would design the system that already exists. It is not a conspiracy exactly. It is something more organic and in some ways more insidious. It is the emergent result of thousands of individual industries, social systems, and psychological tendencies all pointing in the same direction at the same time. Understanding this system, really understanding it mechanically, is one of the most useful things a high earner can do, because you cannot defend against a mechanism you cannot see. Let us start with the most immediate and arguably most powerful driver of lifestyle inflation: housing. The home purchase is the single largest financial decision most people make, and it is also the decision most thoroughly surrounded by social pressure, emotional reasoning, and industry incentives that all point towards spending more. The mortgage industry is built on the concept of maximum qualification. Lenders tell you what you can afford based on what they are willing to lend, not based on what is actually optimal for your financial position. The real estate industry earns commissions proportional to purchase price, meaning that agents, whatever their personal ethics, have a structural incentive to show you properties at the top of your range. The cultural narrative around homeownership is drenched in the language of investment, of building equity, of making a smart long-term choice, language that obscures the fact that the home you are buying is also a consumption item, and that the more expensive version of it costs you not just more in mortgage payments, but more in property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and the lifestyle expectations of the neighborhood you have moved into. This last point is underappreciated. When you buy a home in a particular neighborhood, you are not just buying the home, you are buying membership in a social ecosystem with norms, expectations, and spending patterns. The schools there may have fundraisers that cost hundreds or thousands of dollars a year to participate in meaningfully. The social gatherings involve restaurants and experiences calibrated to that income level. The children's activities, the home maintenance standards, the landscaping, the holiday decorating, all of it has a normal that was established by people earning what the neighborhood earns, and that normal will be communicated to you continuously and with remarkable social efficiency. Moving up in housing does not just change your mortgage payment, it changes the entire cost structure of your life. The same principle applies, with variations, to vehicles. The vehicle you drive signals your category and creates an ongoing cost obligation that is almost always larger than people realize when they make the decision. The car payment is visible, the insurance premium increase, the higher registration fees, the elevated maintenance costs for a luxury brand, the fuel costs of a larger vehicle. These are less salient at the point of purchase and add up continuously. More subtly, the car shapes behavior. When you drive a car that costs $60,000, you park it in the garage and keep it clean and maintain it carefully. You do not take it on the camping trip where it might get scratched. You pay for the covered parking. These are small decisions, each individually rational, but they reflect the way an expensive object generates ongoing behavioral obligations that cost money. The vehicle depreciates. The behavioral obligations do not. After housing and vehicles, the next major category of lifestyle inflation is what I will call experiential consumption: travel, dining, entertainment, and leisure. This category is particularly interesting because it is defended differently than material goods. You cannot keep up with the Joneses by buying things, the culturally sophisticated high earner often believes, but you also cannot be seen as a person who does not travel, who does not have experiences worth posting, who has not been to the places that people in your social world go to. Experiential consumption has been thoroughly documented to produce greater happiness than material consumption. This is true. It is also used consciously and unconsciously to justify experiential spending that is wildly disproportionate to what it would need to cost to produce the actual experience. The experience of a beautiful beach does not require a $1,400 a night resort. The experience of connection with friends does not require a $300 dinner. But the social performance of the experience, the documentation of it, the calibration of it to the standard of your peer group, that does require the expensive version. And this is a crucial distinction that the high earner in the trap almost never makes clearly. They conflate the actual experience, the pleasure, the rest, the connection, with the social performance of that experience, and so they consistently purchase the expensive version, telling themselves it is about the experience when it is actually, in significant part, about the performance. Children are one of the most powerful accelerants of lifestyle inflation, and this is among the most sensitive topics in this entire book. I want to be clear, good parenting is not correlated with expensive parenting. The research on child outcomes does not support the idea that private schools, elaborate activities, and luxury experiences produce meaningfully better adult outcomes than their more modest equivalents. But the cultural narrative within high-income communities has made expensive parenting feel synonymous with good parenting, and the social cost of opting out of this narrative is real and significant. The private school calculus is a particularly important example. Private school tuition at quality institutions can easily run $30,000 to $50,000 per child per year. For a family with 2 children, this is $60,000 to $100,000 a year in after-tax spending, money that, if invested instead, would produce transformative wealth over a decade. The decision to send children to private school is often made not through careful analysis of educational outcomes, but through social pressure, through fear of the local public option, through a narrative about giving children every possible advantage. There are situations where private school genuinely offers things the public option cannot. I am not arguing against private education categorically. I am arguing that the decision should be made clearly, with full awareness of the financial cost and with honest evaluation of whether the outcome difference justifies that cost in your specific situation. And I am arguing that in many cases, when high earners make this decision, they do not make it clearly. They make it in a fog of social pressure and parental anxiety and the need to signal that they are giving their children the best, and they do not fully reckon with what it costs them in financial freedom. Clothing and appearance constitute another significant and underanalyzed category. In high-income professional environments, there is a real and legitimate need to dress appropriately, and appropriate can be genuinely expensive. But the category expands far beyond necessity for most high earners. The wardrobe that gets updated seasonally, the grooming products and services, the gym membership at the premium facility, the skincare and wellness spending that has exploded as a category and is heavily marketed to exactly the demographic of educated, high-earning individuals who can be sold the idea that spending heavily on their bodies and their health is a form of self-investment. This is not to say any of these things are worthless. Some of them are genuinely valuable. The question is whether they are being chosen consciously or whether they are being accumulated because they are normal in your social world, and the discomfort of not having them exceeds the motivation to evaluate whether they are worth what they cost. Now I want to introduce a concept that I think is central to understanding the machinery of lifestyle inflation, and that is the concept of the baseline shift. A baseline shift is what happens when a discretionary expenditure becomes perceived as non-negotiable. It is when the restaurant dinner becomes not a treat, but a regular Tuesday because you are too tired to cook, and you have always just done this, and stopping would feel like deprivation. It is when the business class upgrade becomes just how you travel, because you make enough money for it, and your back hurts in economy, and you deserve to be comfortable. It is when the vacation budget doubles because last year's trip was so restorative, and you need that restoration to function, and you cannot imagine cutting back on the thing that keeps you sane. Baseline shifts are nearly always experienced as necessity rather than choice. This is their power. Once something has shifted into the baseline, spending on it does not feel like spending. It feels like maintenance, and so it is almost never questioned, almost never evaluated for whether it is still producing value proportional to its cost, almost never recognized as the discretionary choice it actually is. The cumulative weight of baseline shifts is the primary mechanism of lifestyle inflation. It is rarely one big decision that absorbs all the money. It is dozens of small decisions that each individually seemed reasonable, each of which shifted the baseline slightly, and which collectively created a cost structure that now requires the full income, just to sustain. Here is a useful exercise. Go through your spending for the last 12 months and ask yourself, for each category, when did this become normal? When was the first time I spent money on this? And what was the context? Was it a deliberate choice or a drift? If I had never started it, would I miss it, or would I simply not know what I was missing? And if I stopped it tomorrow, would the loss be proportional to the cost? Most high earners who do this exercise discover that a significant portion of their spending is on things that have shifted into the baseline through drift rather than deliberate decision, and that many of those things would not be missed as much as feared if they were removed. That is an important discovery. It is also not sufficient on its own, because the psychological and social forces driving the spending are still in place even after you have identified the pattern intellectually. The machinery does not stop running just because you can see it. You have to actively interrupt it. And that requires understanding not just what the machine does, but what powers it. What powers it is social comparison, fear of regression, identity, and the relentless, sophisticated marketing of an entire economy organized around converting your income into spending as efficiently as possible. Let us talk about that economy. Chapter 3: The Status Economy and the People Who Profit from Your Insecurity. You are a market. This is not a metaphor. The high-income professional is one of the most valuable consumer segments in the economy, and an enormous amount of intellectual effort, psychological research, and marketing sophistication has been deployed to understand how to extract the maximum possible spending from you. This is not paranoia. This is just business. And understanding it as business, as the deliberate, strategic, coordinated effort of industries whose interests are directly opposed to your financial independence, is one of the most clarifying perspectives you can adopt. Let us start with the financial services industry, because it is the most directly relevant and the most comprehensively misunderstood. Most people believe that financial advisors and wealth managers are in general working to maximize their clients' wealth. This is sometimes true. It is less true than the industry's marketing would suggest. The financial advisory industry is in large part organized around products that generate fees and commissions for the advisor, regardless of whether those products are optimal for the client. This is a structural problem, not primarily a character problem. There are ethical financial advisors. There are also incentive structures that systematically push advisors toward products that pay them well, regardless of client outcome. The mutual fund industry, for example, has documented evidence spanning decades showing that actively managed funds, which charge higher fees and generate more revenue for advisors who sell them, consistently underperform simple, low-cost index funds over the long term. This is not a secret. It has been studied extensively, published extensively, and is considered settled in most serious academic finance, and yet actively managed funds continue to be sold to millions of clients by advisors who are compensated to sell them. The insurance industry sells high-income individuals' products, whole life insurance, complex annuities, variable universal life policies that are often deeply suboptimal as financial instruments, but generate substantial commissions and feel, to the buyer, like sophisticated financial planning. The person buying one of these products walks away feeling like they have been responsible, like they have invested in their future, when they have in fact purchased an expensive, illiquid, low-return product from someone who had a direct financial incentive to sell it to them. The real estate investment industry pitches syndications, REITs, and complex property investments that promise high returns and often deliver mediocre ones, while generating substantial fees for the promoters. The investment banking and brokerage world creates products of such complexity that even sophisticated clients cannot evaluate them clearly, which is not accidental. Complexity generates fee opportunities, simplicity does not. None of this is to say that financial professionals are uniformly predatory or that financial products are uniformly bad. It is to say that the financial services industry as a whole is not organized around your wealth creation. It is organized around its own revenue generation, and your interests and its interests are, in many important cases, directly opposed. The high-income professional is the ideal client for this industry because they have money to manage. They are often too busy to be properly informed. They have been conditioned to believe that complexity is sophistication, and they have a self-image as intelligent and successful people that makes it psychologically difficult to admit they might be getting played. Now let us talk about the luxury goods and lifestyle industry, which is in some ways even more sophisticated in its approach to the high-income consumer. The luxury market does not sell products. It sells identity. It sells belonging. It sells the right to feel that you are in the group that you have worked so hard to join. When you buy a luxury good, a watch, a handbag, a car, a piece of furniture, you are not primarily buying the object's utility. You are buying a signal, and you are buying the internal sensation of being the kind of person who owns that object. The luxury industry understands this at a profound level and is exceptionally good at engineering both the signal and the sensation. The brand storytelling is meticulous. The scarcity is carefully managed. The retail experience is designed to make you feel elevated by the association. The celebrity and cultural endorsement is curated to attach the brand to the aspirational identities of the target market, and it works. It works because the desire it is exploiting, the desire to belong, to be recognized, to have arrived, is a genuine and deep human desire. The industry did not create the desire. It simply learned to monetize it with extraordinary efficiency. The wellness and self-care industry is a fascinating case study in premium extraction from exactly the demographic we are discussing. The educated, high-earning professional is a perfect target. They believe in the importance of health. They have been told that their bodies are assets to invest in. They are often stressed and physically depleted from the demands of their work, and they have disposable income to spend on relief. The industry has expanded to capture almost every aspect of physical and mental maintenance and offered a premium version. The gym that charges $500 a month instead of $50 because it has better equipment and a nicer environment and the social experience of being around other people at your income level. The supplements that have essentially no better evidence base than the generic versions but cost 10 times as much. The therapy and coaching and retreating and mindfulness applications and sleep optimization products that have aggregated into a category that many high earners are spending thousands of dollars a month on. Again, some of this is valuable. Real wellness matters. The question is whether the premium version is producing premium outcomes, or whether it is producing the sensation of investing in yourself while primarily generating revenue for the industry selling you that sensation. The education industrial complex deserves its own analysis. We discussed private K-12 schooling earlier. The same logic extends into higher education, into the professional development industry, into the certification and conference and MBA industrial complex that sells high earners the continuous feeling that they need to spend more to keep their edge, to maintain their status, to justify their position at the table. This is particularly insidious because it attaches itself to legitimate professional motivations. You do need to continue learning. Your career does depend partly on your credentials and your network, but the industry around this has expanded far beyond what is actually necessary or even useful, and it has become exceptionally good at making high earners feel that not spending on their professional development is a dangerous form of stagnation. Social media, while not a traditional industry in the commercial sense, deserves mention here because of its role as the connective tissue of the status economy. The platforms are designed to maximize engagement, and engagement is maximized by content that triggers social comparison, aspirational desire, and the fear of missing out. The high-income professional on Instagram is not just seeing what their friends are doing. They are being fed a curated stream of aspirational content designed to make them feel that their current life is not quite enough, that there are experiences and objects and states of being that they are not yet achieving, that the work of self-construction is never done. This is not neutral. It is the continuous software update of the desire engine running in your pocket, feeding the exact psychological processes that drive lifestyle inflation. I want to be very careful here not to tip into a kind of conspiracy thinking that would be both inaccurate and unhelpful. The industries I have described are not coordinated in any sinister sense. They are each doing what industries do, finding the most effective ways to generate revenue from their target markets. The result is a kind of emergent system that is remarkably effective at keeping high earners in a state of perpetual consumption, but it did not require anyone to design it that way. It evolved that way because that is what optimizing for revenue produces. Understanding this does not require you to be angry at the system. It requires you to be clear-eyed about it. You are operating in an environment that has been carefully engineered, not against you personally, but against your financial independence in general, and the first step to navigating it intelligently is to see it clearly. What keeps most high earners from seeing it clearly is something we have not yet addressed directly: identity. Specifically, the way in which the spending the trap requires has become fused with who they believe themselves to be. That is the next chapter, and it is perhaps the most psychologically complex one in this book. Chapter 4. The Identity Trap Within the Money Trap. There is a question I want you to sit with before we go any further. Who would you be if you stopped spending the way you currently spend? If you drive the older car, take the more modest vacation, send your children to the public school, wear the less expensive clothes, live in the smaller house in the less prestigious neighborhood, who are you then? What story do you tell about yourself? What does it mean about where you came from, and where you are going, and whether the struggle was worth it? These are not rhetorical questions. They are some of the most practically important questions a high earner in the trap can ask, because the answers reveal the degree to which the spending has become identity, which is to say, the degree to which the spending has become psychologically non-negotiable regardless of its financial consequences. Identity is the deepest layer of the high-income trap. We can understand the psychology of arrival and the hedonic treadmill. We can understand the machinery of lifestyle inflation. We can understand the industries profiting from our insecurity. And still, after all of that understanding, we can remain stuck, because the spending is not just spending anymore. It is a performance of who we are, and performances, once established, are terrifyingly difficult to walk back. Let me explain what I mean by performance, because I am using the word in a specific sense borrowed from sociology. The sociologist Irving Goffman described social life as a continuous series of performances. We present ourselves to others and to ourselves through the things we do and the things we own and the places we inhabit. This is not dishonesty. It is the fundamental human activity of identity construction, of communicating who we are to the social world and to our own inner audience. The problem for the high earner is that their identity performance has become expensive. The identity they have constructed, the successful professional, the person who made it, the provider who gives their family a beautiful life, the sophisticated individual with refined tastes and worthwhile experiences, requires ongoing investment to maintain. And because it is identity, not just preference, reducing that investment feels like a reduction of self, not just a reduction of spending. This is why conversations about money between partners so often become surprisingly heated, even when both people are financially intelligent and apparently on the same side. Because what sounds like a conversation about the vacation budget or the school choice or the car is actually a conversation about identity, about who we are and what kind of life we live and what we mean to each other and what we mean to ourselves. Financial decisions, once embedded in identity, are no longer purely financial, they are existential. Let us look at some of the specific identity narratives that are most common among high earners in the trap. The first is what I call the deserving narrative. It goes like this: I worked extremely hard to get where I am. I sacrificed during the years of building my career. I deferred a great deal of pleasure and endured a great deal of stress in order to achieve this income level. I deserve to enjoy the fruits of that sacrifice. Cutting back would be a denial of what I have earned. This narrative is emotionally compelling Because it is based in something true. The work was real, the sacrifice was real, the achievement is real. But the narrative draws a false conclusion from these true premises. It concludes that the enjoyment of success must take the form of high spending, that there is no other way to honor the struggle than to live expensively. This is exactly what the consumer economy would like you to believe, and it is exactly what keeps you in the trap. You can honor your achievement without spending all of it. You can be proud of what you have built without converting it entirely into consumption. The deserving narrative conflates financial achievement with consumption entitlement, and this conflation is the mechanism that prevents wealth from actually accumulating. The second common identity narrative is what I call the provider narrative. It goes, "My family deserves the best. My children deserve every advantage." Cutting back means giving my family less, and giving my family less is a failure of the most fundamental obligation. My spending is not for me, it is for them. This narrative is particularly resistant to challenge because it frames the spending as selflessness rather than self-indulgence. It wraps consumption in the language of love and obligation, making it feel like the good and virtuous thing to do. And again, it is based in something real, the genuine desire to provide for the people you love, to give your children opportunities you may not have had, to be the partner or parent who comes through. But the provider narrative, when it drives unconstrained spending, often produces the opposite of what it intends. The parent who spends everything on giving their child a lavish childhood and does not build wealth is the parent who will need financial support from that child in retirement. The partner who performs financial abundance to feel like a good provider is the partner who cannot retire, cannot absorb a financial shock, cannot provide the actual security that the people they love most would genuinely prefer over the business class seat and the private school tuition. Providing real financial security to your family requires accumulating assets, not performing prosperity. The provider narrative, in its common form, directly prevents the thing it claims to be pursuing. The third narrative is the one that is perhaps most specific to people who grew up without money, and I call it the visibility narrative. It goes, "I grew up poor or working class. The people I grew up around did not have what I have now. Cutting back, living modestly, being frugal would make me look like I did not make it. To them, to myself, to the world." Visible prosperity is the proof of the journey's success. This narrative is the most psychologically raw and the most important to understand with compassion. For someone who grew up in real scarcity, the visible signs of financial success are not trivial. They are the evidence of transformation, the physical manifestation of the distance traveled, the ongoing rebuttal to anyone who ever suggested they would not amount to much. The expensive car and the nice house and the visible life of comfort are not just purchases, they are testimony. But they are testimony to the past, not preparation for the future. And maintaining them at the cost of actual financial security is a way of letting the past determine the present indefinitely. The person trapped in the visibility narrative is still performing for the audience of their childhood, still trying to prove something to people who may not even be watching, still spending to close a psychological gap that no amount of spending can actually close. The wound underneath the visibility narrative is the need for the journey to have been worth it, for the sacrifice to have produced something undeniable, for there to be no ambiguity about whether you made it. This is understandable. It is also a need that spending cannot meet. No house is nice enough. No car is expensive enough. No vacation is impressive enough to produce the permanent, settled sense that the journey was worth it and the arrival is complete. That sense, when it comes, and it can come, comes from within, from a relationship with one's own story and values that does not require ongoing external validation. It does not come from the next purchase. The fourth identity narrative is one I call the sophistication narrative, and it operates somewhat differently from the others because it is less emotionally charged and more cognitively embedded. It goes, "I am an intelligent, educated, successful person with refined tastes. The things I spend money on reflect the quality of my judgment and the sophistication of my values. Spending less would not save money. It would degrade the quality of my experience and reflect poorly on my discernment. This narrative is particularly common among people with advanced education and professional achievement in creative, intellectual, or cultural fields. It attaches spending to identity as a person of taste and intelligence, making frugality feel not just financially irrelevant, but actually intellectually inferior. The choice of people who do not understand quality, who cannot tell the difference, who settle. The sophistication narrative is one that the luxury and experience industries have been particularly active in constructing and reinforcing, because it is exceptionally effective at defeating cost consciousness. If spending less means being less sophisticated, then any intelligent person with an identity investment in their sophistication will resist spending less with genuine intellectual conviction. But this is largely a manufactured connection. Sophistication and expensive consumption are not the same thing. Some of the most aesthetically refined, intellectually sophisticated people in history have lived simply. The conflation of taste with spending is a marketing achievement, not a philosophical truth. I want to close this chapter with a concept that I think is one of the most useful in this entire book, because it points directly toward the solution to the identity trap. The concept is this: the difference between a value and a preference is that a value remains stable across circumstances, while a preference is dependent on context and comparison. If genuine quality of experience is a value for you, if you truly care about beautiful food, beautiful environments, meaningful travel, excellent craftsmanship, then that value can be honored at many different spending levels. If what you actually have is a preference for the expensive version because it signals something and is normal in your social world, then what you have is not a value. You have a social obligation that has been dressed up as a value. Testing this distinction is uncomfortable but useful. Ask yourself, if no one would know, would you still make this choice? If you could have the experience without the signal, without the visibility, without the social communication of your status, would you still want it? If the restaurant were equally delicious but completely unknown and unfashionable, would you still go? If the vacation were equally restorative but not postable and not impressive, would you still take it? When the answer is yes, you are dealing with a genuine value. When the answer is uncertain or no, you are dealing with a social performance that has been labeled a value. Your genuine values deserve to be funded. Your social performances are costing you your freedom, and they are costing you the chance to build something real. Chapter 5: The Employer Equation and the Illusion of Security. There is a foundational assumption that most high-income professionals carry, and it runs so deep that it is rarely examined explicitly. The assumption is this: my income is secure because my skills are valuable and my employer needs me. This assumption feels reasonable. It may even be largely accurate in many cases, but it is not the same as actual financial security, and the confusion between the two is one of the most consequential errors that high earners make. Let me make the distinction concrete. Financial security is the condition in which your capacity to meet your needs and live the life you have chosen does not depend on any single external entity continuing to make decisions in your favor. Employment security is the condition in which a specific employer has chosen to continue paying you under specific terms that they can change or revoke at any time for any number of reasons, many of which have nothing to do with your performance or your value. These are very different things, and one of them is an asset. The other is a vulnerability. The high earner who is fully dependent on their employment income, who has no significant assets, no liquid savings worth mentioning relative to their lifestyle cost, no income streams that do not require their continued employment, is, financially speaking, in a precarious position that is almost perfectly invisible from the outside and often from the inside as well. They look successful, they earn well, they have the markers of prosperity, and they are one significant life disruption away from a financial crisis. What kinds of disruptions? The industry contraction that results in mass layoffs? The acquisition or merger that eliminates their role? The health event that affects their ability to perform? The organizational political shift that makes them persona non grata? The burnout that makes continuation genuinely impossible? The ethical conflict that makes continuation unconscionable? Any of these events, for the high earner with no assets and high fixed costs, is not just a career disruption, it is a financial catastrophe. This is not a small risk. Job loss among high earners, while less frequent than among lower-wage workers, is not rare. Career disruptions happen, industries change, organizations transform, and when they do, the high earner with a high-cost lifestyle and no financial cushion discovers very quickly that income and security are not the same thing. I want to tell you about what happens to people in this situation because it is important to understand it viscerally and not just analytically. When a high-income professional loses their job with no significant savings, they do not experience the relatively gentle financial adjustment of someone with modest fixed costs. They experience an immediate and violent collision between their income stream and their cost structure. The mortgage needs to be paid, the car payments need to be made, the school tuition, which they have committed to, which their children are enrolled in, which pulling out of now would disrupt their children's lives, needs to continue. The lifestyle that had been built on the assumption of continued income now demands continued income, and continued income is exactly what has stopped. The result is often catastrophic in a way that is disproportionate to the length of the employment gap. 6 months of unemployment for someone with $100,000 in accessible savings and modest fixed costs is a difficult but manageable period of reorientation. 6 months of unemployment for someone with minimal savings and a monthly cost structure of $15,000 is a financial crisis that can erase years of apparent prosperity and force decisions: selling the home, withdrawing from retirement accounts, moving children out of private schools, that are experienced as catastrophic and that leave lasting marks on the family. But the employment dependence trap is not just about the catastrophic scenario. It operates on a subtler level that affects the high earner even when their job is perfectly secure. It affects their relationship with their employer. It affects their willingness to negotiate, to push back, to walk away from situations that are not in their best interest, to take risks that could lead to better outcomes. When your employer is your only income source and your lifestyle requires that income to continue, your employer has enormous leverage over you. This leverage is often not explicitly exercised. It does not need to be, but it shapes the relationship in ways that are deeply unfavorable to you. You are less likely to negotiate hard for compensation because you are afraid of damaging the relationship. You are less likely to speak frankly about problems in the organization because you cannot afford the political consequences. You are less likely to pursue the interesting but risky opportunity to start the side project, to take the sabbatical, to invest in the professional development that might lead somewhere new. Financial dependency on your employer is the mechanism by which your employer purchases not just your time, but your latitude. And this is, from the employer's perspective, a feature of the arrangement, not a bug. I have heard many high earners describe their relationship with their employer using the language of partnership, of mutual respect, of the employer's recognition of their value, and sometimes this is accurate. Good employers do exist, but the dynamic of the relationship is fundamentally asymmetric when one party can walk away and the other cannot. And the high earner with no savings and high fixed costs cannot walk away. They can only negotiate at the margin of a relationship they cannot exit. This asymmetry is worth sitting with. Think about the moments in your career when you knew that a situation was not right. The unfair treatment, the unsustainable demand, the direction you disagreed with, the line you were being asked to approach, and think about the decisions you made. How many of those decisions were shaped by the knowledge, perhaps not fully conscious, that you could not afford to make the choice that would have been right for you? How much of your professional trajectory has been determined not by what you wanted, but by what you felt you could not afford to walk away from. This is the cost of employment dependence that never shows up on a balance sheet, the decisions you could not make, the choices you could not take, the version of your career that you could not pursue because the financial structure of your life had removed your ability to choose freely. The antidote to this situation is not complicated in concept, though it is genuinely difficult in execution. You need to build a financial position that allows you to make choices from a place of freedom rather than compulsion. This means liquid savings that could sustain your lifestyle for a meaningful period, not the 3 to 6 months that conventional wisdom suggests, which is barely enough to absorb a disruption, but a year or more of real runway. It means building assets that generate income or appreciate in value, reducing your dependence on a single income stream. It means, over time, reducing the gap between your fixed costs and your income, so that a disruption in income does not immediately become a crisis. None of this is possible while every dollar of income is being converted into lifestyle, which is why the identity and social dimensions of the trap are not just psychological curiosities, they are the direct mechanism by which you are kept dependent. I want to address something that high earners sometimes resist about this analysis. The idea that they should be building runway and assets instead of spending feels like it conflicts with the enjoyment of what they have worked to achieve. It feels like continued deferred gratification, which is exactly what they were told they would get to stop doing once they made it. This framing is the trap talking. The actual trade-off is not between enjoyment now and security later. The actual trade-off is between performed prosperity now, the expensive signals, the status spending, the social performance of success, and genuine freedom, the ability to make choices, to take risks, to leave situations that do not serve you, to design your life rather than have it designed by your financial dependency. Genuine freedom is a form of enjoyment that no amount of status spending can purchase. And the high earner who builds toward it, even at some cost to the performance of their success, is making one of the best investments available to them. Chapter 6. The invisible tax of cognitive load. There is a cost to the high-income trap that almost never appears in financial discussions because it is not a financial cost. It is a psychological one. But it is real, it is significant, and it affects every dimension of the high earner's life in ways that compound into enormous long-term consequences. The cost is cognitive load. Cognitive load is the demand placed on working memory and attention by the management of ongoing problems, concerns, and decisions. It is the mental RAM that is consumed by open loops, unresolved tensions, and persistent sources of low-grade stress. And the financial situation of the high earner in the trap is one of the most effective generators of cognitive load imaginable. Because here is what living at the edge of your income does to your mental environment. It populates it with a continuous low-level hum of financial concern, not crisis-level panic. That would at least be clear and galvanizing, but a persistent, low-grade anxiety about whether this month's cash flow is going to work out, whether the end-of-year expenses are going to require a credit card balance, whether the roof replacement that the inspector mentioned is going to require emergency savings that don't quite exist, whether the job is still going to be there in 6 months, whether the retirement projections are anywhere near adequate, whether the life they are living is financially sustainable in any real sense. This hum is nearly constant and nearly invisible. People in this situation often describe themselves as not worrying about money because they are not worrying in the acute, focused sense of staring at a deficit and feeling genuine fear. The worry is too ambient, too background, too integrated into the texture of daily life to be experienced as worry. It is just the weather. It is just how things feel, but it is consuming resources. Attention, working memory, creative capacity, emotional energy, all of these are being taxed by the background financial anxiety even when it is not in the foreground of conscious experience. And this taxation has consequences that extend far beyond finance. Research by the economists Senthil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir, published in their book Scarcity, documented that the experience of scarcity of having less than one feels one needs, whether of money, time, or other resources, produces measurable reductions in cognitive performance. Their research found that the cognitive tax of financial scarcity was roughly equivalent to going through a night without sleep, or to losing a significant number of IQ points. And this cognitive impairment is not limited to thinking about money. It degrades performance across all cognitive domains. The high earner in the trap is not in the same situation as the person in genuine poverty that Mullainathan and Shafir primarily studied, but the mechanism is related. The experience of financial strain, the feeling that there is not enough margin, that the costs are too close to the income, that one disruption could cascade, produces real cognitive costs, even when the absolute income is high. These cognitive costs matter professionally. The high earner who is silently managing financial anxiety is not performing at their cognitive peak. The decisions they make at work, the creative problems they solve, the strategic thinking they do, all of it is happening with a mental environment that is noisier than it needs to be, that has less available bandwidth than it would have without the background financial stress. This is one of the more counterintuitive insights in this book. The financial strategy of living at the edge of your income to maintain a high-status lifestyle is not just financially costly. It actively undermines the professional performance that generates the income on which the entire structure depends. The high earner keeps working extremely hard to maintain an income that is being fully consumed by a lifestyle that requires the income to continue, while the stress of that dependency degrades the performance that makes the income possible. It is a self-undermining cycle. The cognitive load of financial stress also affects relationships. The research on what couples fight about most frequently and most destructively consistently finds that money is at or near the top of the list. And the fights about money are rarely really about money. They are about the fear, the insecurity, the resentment, the differing values and priorities that money differences surface. In high-income households where the financial situation is silently stressful, these conversations are happening with a background charge that makes them more volatile, more costly, and less productive than they would be in a household where financial anxiety had been genuinely reduced. I want to address the relationship between cognitive load and decision quality specifically, because this connection has profound implications for the financial decisions themselves. When you are operating with high cognitive load, when the background hum of financial concern is running, when the mental RAM is partially consumed by open financial loops, the quality of your financial decisions is itself degraded. This creates a cruel feedback loop. The financial situation generates cognitive load. The cognitive load degrades decision quality, and the degraded decisions perpetuate or worsen the financial situation. The decisions that are most vulnerable to this degradation are exactly the ones that most need to be made well. The negotiation of compensation, the evaluation of financial products, the assessment of investment opportunities, the setting of financial priorities and boundaries. These are precisely the decisions that require clear thinking, resistance to short-term temptation, and the ability to evaluate long-term consequences accurately. And these are exactly the decisions that get made poorly when cognitive load is high. This is part of why the high earner often knows, in some sense, what they should do: spend less, save more, build assets, evaluate their financial choices more carefully, but finds it so difficult to actually do it. They are trying to make better decisions with a cognitive environment that is systematically impairing their decision-making capacity. There is a powerful argument here for addressing the cognitive load directly as a financial intervention, rather than just as a side effect of getting the finances right. Reducing the mental complexity of the financial situation, simplifying decisions, automating good behaviors, eliminating the ongoing low-grade anxiety through the accumulation of real financial margin has a return that extends far beyond the direct financial benefit. It restores cognitive bandwidth, improves decision quality, enhances professional performance, and improves relationship quality. The business case for reducing financial stress is, in other words, much larger than it appears when you look only at the balance sheet. It is a quality-of-life investment with returns that compound into better decisions, better performance, and better outcomes across every domain that matters. Rest is also worth addressing here because it is closely related to cognitive load, and because it is one of the most underappreciated inputs into both financial and professional performance. The high earner in the trap is typically not resting well. They are working long hours to maintain their income. They are managing the logistics of an expensive and complex lifestyle. They are performing, socially, professionally, financially, with the energy that good rest would restore. And the research on sleep deprivation, decision quality, and cognitive performance is clear. Insufficient rest is one of the most significant performance degraders available, and its costs are systematically underestimated by people who are in the midst of it. The irony is that much of the lifestyle spending the high earner engages in is framed as rest and restoration: the vacation, the massage, the spa, the premium gym, the fine restaurant. But the financial stress required to fund these items often undermines the restoration they are supposed to provide. You cannot fully relax on a vacation you are putting on a credit card. You cannot truly restore on a weekend that is shadowed by Monday's financial decisions. The performance of rest is not the same as actual rest, and the high-income trap, by maintaining continuous financial stress, makes actual rest extraordinarily difficult to achieve, regardless of how much money is being spent on its proxies. Genuine rest, the kind that actually restores cognitive capacity and emotional resilience, requires a felt sense of safety and margin, and that felt sense cannot be bought. It has to be built. Chapter 7: The Architecture of Exit. Everything we have discussed so far, the psychology of arrival, the machinery of lifestyle inflation, the status economy, the identity trap, the employer dependence, the cognitive load, has been in service of understanding. And understanding, as I said at the beginning, is where the exit begins. But it is not the exit itself. The exit requires action. And action in this domain requires a framework that accounts for the psychological and social realities we have been discussing, because the standard personal finance advice, make a budget, spend less than you earn, invest the difference, fails not because it is wrong, but because it does not engage with the actual barriers to implementation. Here is the architecture I want to propose. It has several components, and they work in a specific order, because the order matters. The first component is clarity, and it is the one that precedes all others. You cannot build an exit from a trap you have not clearly mapped. Most high earners in the trap have a genuinely unclear picture of their financial position, not because they are unintelligent, but because the situation is emotionally charged enough that full clarity is uncomfortable, and because the busyness of their lives provides a convenient excuse not to achieve it. Clarity means knowing precisely what your current net worth is, the sum of all your assets minus the sum of all your liabilities. Not a rough estimate, not a feeling, a number, documented and understood. For many high earners, doing this exercise for the first time produces a genuinely shocking result. The income has been high for years. The lifestyle feels prosperous. The net worth, when actually calculated, is often a small fraction of what the person imagined, and sometimes it is genuinely negative. Clarity also means knowing exactly what your monthly spending is, by category, without the rationalizations and the fuzziness. It means knowing what your fixed costs are, the things that continue whether or not you make active decisions about them, and what your discretionary costs are, and what the total is as a percentage of your income. Clarity means knowing what your employer's actual obligations to you are, what your non-compete situation is, what your benefits situation is, and what the real-world consequences of various career scenarios would be. This kind of clarity is uncomfortable. It requires confronting numbers that may be worse than hoped. It requires having conversations with partners that may be difficult. It requires engaging with a financial reality that the busyness of life has provided an excuse to avoid. But without this clarity, every other action is improvised in the dark. With it, you have something to work with. The second component is what I call the margin intervention. The goal here is simple to state and psychologically demanding to execute. Create a positive gap between your income and your spending. Not a theoretical gap, not an aspirational gap, an actual, monthly, recurring gap that accumulates into something real. The conventional advice here is to cut spending, and some cutting is almost certainly necessary. But I want to propose a more sophisticated framework for how to approach the cuts, because the approach matters enormously for whether the cuts survive contact with real life. The framework is this. Before cutting anything, evaluate each expenditure against two criteria. The first criterion is genuine value. Does this purchase actually produce well-being, pleasure, connection, or other real goods in proportion to its cost? Not imagined value, not social performance value, not the value it would have had the first time you experienced it, actual, current value. The second criterion is identity alignment. Is this expenditure reflecting who you actually are and what you actually value? Or is it reflecting who your social environment expects you to be? Expenditures that fail both criteria are easy to cut. They produce little real value, and they are performing an identity that is not genuinely yours. These should go first. And going first, they create momentum. Expenditures that pass the second criterion but fail the first, things that align with your genuine values but are currently not producing proportional well-being, can often be restructured. You can get the same genuine value at lower cost. The genuine appreciation of beautiful food does not require $300 dinners. The genuine desire for rest and nature does not require resort pricing. Expenditures that pass both criteria, things that genuinely produce value and genuinely reflect who you are, deserve to be funded, and funded generously. The goal is not austerity, the goal is intentionality, spending on what matters and not spending on what does not. This framework also needs to address the social dimension, because many expenditures that would fail the individual analysis are maintained for social reasons. The key insight here is that social consequences of spending reduction are almost always smaller than anticipated. The people in your social world are generally far more concerned with their own lives and their own anxieties than with monitoring whether your vacation was as expensive as last year's or whether your new car is as impressive as your previous one. Social consequences that are real, situations where reduced spending would genuinely damage an important relationship or create a meaningful professional liability, do need to be taken seriously, but they should be evaluated honestly rather than assumed reflexively. Most of the social cost of spending reduction is imagined, and imagined with great vividness by the person whose identity has become attached to the spending. The third component is what I call the automation of virtue. This is the recognition that willpower is a finite and unreliable resource, and that good financial behavior cannot depend on continuous acts of willpower in a world that is continuously organized to undermine it. The automation of virtue means building systems that remove willpower from the equation. It means setting up automatic transfers to savings and investment accounts that happen before you have the opportunity to spend the money. It means putting retirement contributions at the maximum and making the decision not to change them. It means paying yourself first, in the most literal, mechanically automated sense, and then living on what remains. This approach is not new. It is the cornerstone of most serious financial advice. But it is underused by high earners because high earners often believe, with some justification, that their income is sufficient to make manual management work. They believe they will make the good decisions in real time because they are intelligent and disciplined and they know what they should do. And they consistently find that this is not how it works, because the forces driving consumption, social comparison, identity, habit, convenience, exhaustion, are more powerful than real-time willpower applied against them. Automation removes the battlefield. When the money has already moved to savings before you experience the month-spending temptations, the savings decision is already made. It does not need to be remade daily against the headwinds of everything discussed in this book. The fourth component is what I call identity reconstruction, and it is the one that provides the psychological sustainability the other components require. Because you can automate savings and cut spending and achieve clarity about your finances, and still find that the identity pressure to maintain the lifestyle gradually erodes every gain, that the social comparison renews the desire to spend, and that the whole structure slowly reverts to the previous equilibrium. Identity reconstruction means building a new relationship with money and with the story of your success that is not dependent on consumption for its validation. This is spiritual work as much as financial work, and I do not use the word spiritual loosely. It requires examining what you actually believe about what a successful life looks like, what you are actually trying to prove and to whom, what you would need to feel settled in your own sense of having made it. And it requires constructing answers to those questions that do not require ongoing expenditure to sustain. For many people, this work involves reclaiming a sense of success that is rooted in genuine accomplishment, the relationships built, the problems solved, the growth achieved, the contributions made, rather than in the lifestyle signals that perform success without actually constituting it. It involves developing a relationship with the genuine pleasures of your life. The things that actually make you happy, that actually restore you, that actually connect you to what matters, and recognizing that these things are almost always available at a fraction of the cost of their status signal equivalents. It involves, for many people who grew up without money, doing real work on the psychological relationship with the past, on the fear of regression, the need for visible proof of transformation, the audience for whom the performance of success is being maintained. This work is sometimes best done with professional support. There is no shame in that. The wounds that drive the visibility narrative are real wounds, and it involves developing a new aspiration, not the aspiration to perform prosperity, but the aspiration to be genuinely free. Free to choose your employer, free to leave situations that do not serve you, free to take risks that align with your values, free to design your life rather than have it designed by your financial dependency, free eventually from the requirement to work at all, if that is what you choose. This is the aspiration that the trap prevents you from having, because it requires you to accumulate what the trap consumes. And it is an aspiration worth working for, because the freedom it describes is real, and it is available to people at your income level who make a different set of choices than the ones the trap has been making for you. The fifth component is community, finding, cultivating, and investing in relationships with people who share these values. Because you cannot escape the social dimension of the trap by ignoring it. The social environment drives behavior, and if your social environment continues to normalize the patterns of high-income overconsumption, the gravitational pull of that norm will work continuously against every other change you make. This does not mean abandoning your existing friendships or pretending to values you do not have. It means actively seeking out people through communities, conversations, professional networks, books, and ideas who are building what you are trying to build. People for whom financial independence is a genuine goal. People who are not performing prosperity but accumulating it. People whose relationship with money is grounded in intentionality rather than social comparison. These people exist in larger numbers than you might expect. The financial independence movement, broadly construed, contains communities of people who have chosen this path at various income levels and are navigating exactly the social and psychological challenges you face. Connecting with those communities provides something invaluable, a different reference class, a different normal, a social environment in which the person building real wealth is admired rather than the person performing it. Social norms are powerful precisely because they are ambient, because they operate through the continuous background signal of what everyone around you is doing. The most effective way to change your behavior over the long term is to change the ambient signal, and you have more control over your social environment than you may have exercised. Chapter 8. Building the life that actually pays. There is a version of your life that is not yet being lived. It is not a version of deprivation. It is not a version of frugality as punishment, of giving up the things that matter in service of some abstract future number. It is a version of genuine abundance, of having more of what actually produces well-being and less of what only performs it, of having freedom of movement, of choice, of time and attention in ways that the current version of your life cannot provide. That version is what this chapter is about. Not just escaping the trap, but building something specific on the other side. I want to start with a concept that I think is underused in financial thinking, and that is the concept of the return on financial position. Most people think about returns in terms of specific investments, the return on a stock, a property, a business. But there is a return on the overall financial position, the aggregate of your assets, your savings rate, your debt situation, your diversification, that is often more important than any individual investment decision and almost never explicitly calculated. The return on financial position includes, first, the avoided loss. The person with a year of living expenses in liquid savings does not have to take the bad deal when a disruption happens. They do not have to sell assets at the wrong time, take on high-interest debt, or make career decisions from a position of desperation. The value of this avoided loss is invisible when things are going well and catastrophic when they are not. The return on financial position includes, second, the option value, the ability to take opportunities that require capital or that require the freedom that only comes from not being fully dependent on any single income source, the investment in the friend's startup that turns out to be significant, the sabbatical that leads to a new career direction, the decision to leave the well-paying but soul-destroying job in favor of something better, made possible by the savings that could sustain the transition. Option value is the most underappreciated form of wealth for high earners. It is the value of the doors that open when you are not financially desperate, the decisions you can make when you are not financially constrained, the risks you can take when you have the capital to absorb a loss. It is the value of freedom, priced in financial terms, and it is enormous. The return on financial position includes, third, the compound growth effect on whatever is actually being saved and invested. This is the most commonly cited benefit of saving and investing, and it is real. Small differences in savings rate early in the wealth-building period produce very large differences in final outcome because of the exponential nature of compound growth. The high earner who saves 10% of their income for 20 years and the high earner who saves 30% for the same period are not going to end up in a position that is 3 times as different as their savings rates would suggest. They are going to end up in a position that is many multiples different because the additional savings are working and compounding for the entire period. This is the math that the trap prevents high earners from experiencing, not because they do not know the math, they almost always do, but because the trap converts the income before it can reach the savings rate that makes the math transformative. Now I want to talk about what building this life actually looks like in practical terms, because I think it is important to make this concrete rather than to leave it in the abstract. The first practical implication is the savings rate target. Conventional personal finance suggests saving 10 to 15% of income. For high earners who want to achieve genuine financial independence within a reasonable time horizon, the ability to choose not to work or to work only on things they choose, 10 to 15% is almost certainly not sufficient. The research and the math both suggest that savings rates of 30 to 50% of income, maintained over 10 to 20 years, are what produce financial independence for most people. This sounds extreme until you consider what it actually requires in the context of a high income. An individual earning $180,000 annually who saves 40% is still spending $108,000 a year. For most people in most parts of the country, $108,000 a year, after housing, is not a life of deprivation. It is a genuinely comfortable life. The gap between a comfortable life and the performed prosperity of the full $180,000 is not, in terms of actual well-being, as large as the identity trap makes it feel. The second practical implication is the choice of investment vehicle. The simplest, most evidence-based, and most accessible approach for most high earners is also the one that financial complexity tends to obscure: low-cost, diversified index funds in tax-advantaged accounts, with anything beyond those accounts going into taxable brokerage accounts in the same low-cost, diversified instruments. This is not glamorous. It is not sophisticated in the way that the financial industry defines sophistication, but it works better over long periods than almost anything the financial industry sells, and it requires almost no ongoing management. The exception to this simplicity is for high earners who have the expertise, the time, and the capital to engage meaningfully with more complex investment strategies: real estate, private equity, business ownership. These can be excellent wealth builders for people who approach them correctly. The key word is expertise. Complex investments without genuine expertise produce, on average, worse returns than simple index investing with higher fees and more risk. The third practical implication is the career strategy that serves financial independence rather than working against it. This means developing skills that are genuinely scarce and genuinely valuable, because this is the foundation of negotiating power. It means negotiating actively rather than accepting the compensation offered, because research consistently shows that negotiation produces meaningful lifetime income differences for people who do it versus those who do not. It means considering the total compensation package, equity, deferred compensation, benefits, with the same attention given to base salary. It means actively managing the career rather than simply performing well and hoping the organization rewards it. Because organizations do not reward performance automatically, they reward performance in combination with visibility and advocacy. The career strategy for financial independence also means eventually developing income streams that are not fully dependent on any single employer. This might mean consulting, advisory work, intellectual property, investments, a small business, or other sources of income that are not your primary job. These additional streams do not need to be large to be transformative. Even a modest second income source changes the psychological and practical relationship to employment dependence in ways that are disproportionate to the dollar amount involved. The fourth practical implication is a reorientation of what I will call the prosperity compass. The prosperity compass is the internal instrument you use to evaluate how well your life is going financially. For most high earners in the trap, the prosperity compass points toward income. The question it is measuring is, how much am I earning? The upgrade I am proposing is to reorient it to point toward net worth. The question it measures becomes, how much am I building? This is not a small shift. It fundamentally changes what success feels like from the inside. When income is the compass, a raise feels like success and a flat year feels like failure. When net worth is the compass, what matters is whether the gap between what comes in and what goes out is producing something real. A high income that is fully consumed produces nothing on the net worth compass. A moderate income that is aggressively saved and invested produces substantial progress. Reorienting the compass also helps with the social comparison problem, because the income comparison is highly visible. People can see your job title, your employer, your lifestyle, while the net worth comparison is private. When you are competing on income, you are competing in public, and the competition is continuous. When you are building net worth, you are building in private, and the only reference point that matters is your own trajectory over time. There is a profound psychological relief in this shift for people who make it. The freedom from continuous public competition, from the need to keep up, to signal, to perform, is one of the most tangible benefits of the reorientation. You are no longer playing a game where everyone can see the score. You are building something that is yours, in private, on a timeline that is yours. The fifth practical implication is what I think of as the design of the good enough life. Not the optimal life, not the perfect life. The good enough life, lived intentionally and with genuine attention to what actually produces well-being versus what performs it. The good enough life is one in which you have identified the actual sources of your satisfaction, the relationships, the work, the physical experiences, the creative and intellectual engagement, and have organized your spending to protect and fund those sources while declining to fund the social performances that surround them. For some people, this means keeping the house, but eliminating the expensive vacations and the private school. For others, it means keeping the vacations but moving to a less expensive city and a less expensive home. For others, it means radically simplifying the cost structure in exchange for the ability to work fewer hours and spend more time on the things that actually matter. There is no universal formula. The design is individual. What is universal is the process, starting from what actually produces well-being in your life, rather than from what your social environment defines as the normal standard for people at your income level, starting from values rather than from norms, starting from the inside out rather than the outside in. This is, in many ways, a profoundly countercultural act. The entire structure of the consumer economy, the social media environment, the professional peer group, the financial services industry, all of it is pushing from the outside in. All of it is saying, here is what people at your level have, here is what you should want, here is the standard you should be meeting. Designing your life from the inside out requires actively resisting that push, not once but continuously as a practice. It requires knowing yourself well enough to distinguish what you actually want from what the environment has taught you to want. It requires the courage to be somewhat different from the people around you, even when that difference is not visible enough to explain and is not prestigious enough to signal. It also requires something that may be the most important thing in this entire book: patience. The alternative to the trap does not produce immediate, visible results. The person building net worth aggressively may look, from the outside, like they are living less well than the person performing prosperity. The quietly building saver may not have the vacation photos or the impressive car or the conspicuous home of their high-spending peer. The payoff is real, but it is invisible until suddenly it is not, until the day when the financial position provides a freedom that the performer of prosperity cannot access, when the choice becomes possible that was not possible before, when the option opens that required the capital to see. That day comes. It comes for the people who make the choice consistently over years. And when it comes with something that no lifestyle expenditure has ever produced: the genuine, settled, unperformable feeling of financial freedom. Not the performance of having made it, actually making it. Conclusion: the choice that changes everything. We have traveled a long way together in this book. We have looked at the psychology of arrival and why it reliably fails to produce the landing it promises. We have mapped the machinery of lifestyle inflation and how it converts income into fixed costs with astonishing efficiency. We have examined the industries that profit from keeping high earners in a state of perpetual consumption. We have gone deep into the identity traps that make financial change psychologically dangerous to contemplate. We have looked honestly at what employment dependence costs in terms of freedom and choice. We have examined the invisible tax of cognitive load and how financial stress undermines the performance that sustains the income that funds the lifestyle that generates the stress. We have laid out an architecture for exit with specific components and a specific sequence, and we have sketched the life that becomes available on the other side of the trap. Not a life of deprivation, but a life of genuine choice. And now I want to close with the thing that, in my experience, actually determines whether any of this makes a difference. Because information alone never changes behavior. Understanding alone never changes behavior. Even motivation, even the genuine desire to build a different kind of life, is often not enough, because motivation is a feeling, and feelings are temporary, and the forces that maintain the trap are structural, continuous, and patient. What actually changes behavior is a decision, a specific, conscious, committed decision that something is going to be different, not a resolution, not an aspiration, Not a starting Monday I am going to be better about money. A decision. The kind that closes certain doors and opens others. The kind that reorients something fundamental about how you relate to money, to your lifestyle, to the performance of success, to your own identity as a financially capable and financially free person. I want to describe what that decision looks like, because I think it is often imagined as more dramatic than it is. It does not look like selling the house and moving to a cabin. It does not look like quitting your job and starting a blog about frugality. It does not look like any of the dramatic, visible acts of rejection that the internet sometimes holds up as examples of opting out of consumerism. It looks like a Tuesday afternoon when you sit down and calculate your actual net worth for the first time and look at the number clearly. It looks like a conversation with your partner, difficult but honest, about what you actually want your life to look like in 10 years and whether the current financial trajectory gets you there. It looks like setting up an automatic transfer to a savings account for an amount that is uncomfortably large and then not touching it. It looks like the next time you are about to make a significant purchase, pausing, actually pausing, not in the self-flagellating way but in the curious, interested way, and asking, what is this purchase for? What need is it meeting? Is it meeting a genuine need or a social one? Is it producing real value? Or is it producing the performance of value? It looks like those small moments, multiplied across months and years, gradually shifting the center of gravity of your financial life from outflow to accumulation. It looks, from the outside, like almost nothing. It feels, from the inside, like everything. I want to tell you what I believe, having spent a significant part of my thinking life on exactly these questions. You have the income to change your financial life completely. You do not need a higher salary. You do not need a better investment. You do not need a lucky break or a market windfall or a business idea that takes off. You have in your current income more than enough to build genuine financial freedom over a reasonable time horizon. What you need is to stop converting it all into the performance of prosperity and start converting more of it into actual wealth. This is your money. It came from your effort, your skill, your sacrifice, your expertise, your time, the time you spent away from your family, the stress you absorbed, the years you put in building the career that generates this income. Every dollar of it is the product of real cost paid by you. You deserve to have it do something for you beyond funding a lifestyle that keeps you dependent on the next paycheck. You deserve the freedom that becomes available when you have real assets, real margin, real options. You deserve the experience of making a career decision from a position of genuine choice rather than financial compulsion. You deserve the morning you were promised, the one where the financial anxiety has broken like a fever and the ground feels solid and the choices in front of you are real choices, not just the options available within a trap. That morning is available to you. It is not on the other side of a higher salary. It is not on the other side of a lucky event. It is on the other side of a decision. Make it. The trap has held you long enough. The exit is there. You can see it now. Walk out. A final note to the listeners. This book was written for the person who has done everything right and still feels stuck, who followed the script and earned the income and built the career and arrived at a life that looks successful and feels trapped, who suspects that something is wrong but has not had the language or the framework to name it clearly. I hope these pages gave you some of that language, some of that framework. I hope they also gave you something harder to articulate, but more important, the sense that you are not alone in this, that you are not stupid or weak for having been caught in a trap that was designed to catch people exactly like you, and that the way out is real and it is yours to take. The work is yours to do, but the direction is clear. Begin.